What is up? Good morning and welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. We are ready to talk about another Pro-Am tournament. I think that's the best way to put it out there. We've talked about Scott Fish Bowl last week. We're going to talk a lot about Scott Fish Bowl this entire month, but there are a ton of tournaments out there. And I wanted to invite some of those tournaments on to come on, promote themselves. And today we have the good folks from RazzBowl here to talk about RazzBowl 6. And this is one of the first years you guys are able to join RazzBowl. And the rule set is unlike any tournament I've ever heard of. We have the draft room full. Let's get into it. Good morning and welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia. Good morning, Austin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm coming off the release of our summer school best ball series, so we'll talk about that more later. I don't want to take away from the RazzBowl folks, but I'm feeling good this morning. Excited to do some more best ball drafts.
Well, and I give people some behind the scenes. You told me that yesterday's show was basically for me, and I found two reasons yesterday's show was basically for me, because you start the show talking about exposure and how maybe being exposed to a guy 100% of the time isn't the best idea, but I will draft A.T. Perry in every draft in every best ball tournament without a doubt. You can't stop me, Austin. And then you ended the show, well, not quite ended, but close to ended, talking about Anthony Richardson. Is the hype too much? I'm going to try not to bring up Anthony Richardson on this show, but no promises. I can't do that. And Austin already alluded to our guest, and we certainly want to get to them. As I mentioned, this show is going to be about RazzBowl 6. And this is, I believe, if I'm correct, and they're going to tell me if I'm not correct, the first year that a lot of different people can join. I have Matt Stiles and Derek. I should have asked you this before. Is it Favre?
Favre, yes.
Favre. Oh, French. I love it. Matt Stiles and Derek Favre from RazzBowl. And they're here. They are the organizers, I believe, this year of RazzBowl 6. So introduce yourselves, guys. We'll start with you, Matt, the first one I met in this whole
I appreciate the invite. We're excited to get going. The one thing I will let you know from a personal standpoint real quick, Ryan, is you didn't tell me about Austin's hair. I'm a little bit concerned, and I'm drafting against a guy with that flow. It's going to be a rough day for me. But yeah, we had a gentleman that was handling RazzBowl for many years. Steve Paulo was very good, handled it, and he's moved on and is doing some other things. So he turned it over to me. I've refreshed my knowledge of the rules, and Derek and I are going to try to be kind of a two-headed monster and get this thing moving forward and promote it. And like you mentioned, last year and years past, it was 250 people max, all invite only. You kind of had to apply to be in the league. And I thought, well, why not be inclusive of more of the industry and more pro-am, and whoever wants to be in is in. So there are no there's nothing stopping you except yourself from signing up. The article's in the chat. We will post it a few times today.
Yeah.
If you sign up, you're in, and you will be competing against other pros and Joes. So let's get after it.
And Matt, where can people follow you for work from RazzBowl and work on RazzBowl?
Football.razzball.com. They can follow me at Styles08 on the Twitter machine, as Howard Bender likes to say.
Yeah.
So it's there in our the little tags at the bottom. But yeah, we are at RazzBowl or we're at RazzBowl NFL. Another good thing about our better ball tournament is it's free. There is no cost. We are going winner take all this year, so there's some good prizes for the winner. But we don't play second place at RazzBowl. You win this thing, you're going to get the prizes. If not, you're going to have to deal with the repercussions of not winning the whole thing.
There you go. And Derek, let everybody know, introduce yourself, let them know where they can follow you as well.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. All right, glad to be here. Like Matt said, we're kind of tackling the RazzBowl scene this year. You can follow me. You see my Twitter handle down at the bottom. But at RazzBowl, I'm kind of wearing two hats. I contribute on the baseball side and the football side, so a little busy for me this time of year. But we have a lot of fun, once September comes and we do football, we have a lot of fun with both our articles and our live shows. And like Matt said, we're going to be a little bit more active, he and I, and with a show of our own, in addition to our start sit show we do on Sundays.
Yeah. Make sure you guys
go ahead.
Make sure you guys let us know when that show's starting to go live. We'll be more than happy to promote it and let everybody know to go check it out. So.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah. And then, For the off season, I've been handling my the quarterback ranks here at RazzBowl. So I've been following all the, especially through free agency. That was a lot of fun. Where the quarterbacks dropped, as well as the draft season. So that was a lot of fun. A little slow now for me. Looking forward to kicking everything back up with draft season and moving forward.
I have to ask you because you brought it up. Where do you have Anthony Richardson ranked?
We'll probably get into this during the draft. I am not as high on him as some others.
Say less. Thank you. Not you.
As high. Yeah.
Nor am I.
I've got to see it once. I mean, he played, essentially, 3 games. Total of 3 games. And
you are speaking directly to my heart.
Yes. He's got a lot of talent, a lot of potential there. But I'm a little leery if he's going to come out the same way he did last year, after the injury. And so I'm not quite as high on him. He's going to go higher in drafts than I'm going to want to take him. So I probably won't own him very much.
We don't have to talk about him for the rest of the show because that's exactly right. Let's get the draft up on the screen, folks. If you've never tuned in to an episode of Mock It Like It's Hot, welcome. Let me give you a couple of quick reminders. At the end of this thing, Austin, Matt, and Derek are going to recap their drafts, but we are not going to grade every team. That is not what we do here. This is about learning through mock drafting. So we're going to talk about interesting trends. We're going to talk about RazzBowl strategies. And if you need to do something different for this tournament than you would for other tournaments, but we are not going to sit here and tell you every single team. But to start the show, I will let you know who is drafting with us. So we have Shia LaBeouf picking from the first spot. A ton of mock drafts with us. Wilson at the 2. Austin took 3. Faith jumps in with us. She took 4. Cruiser at 5. RazzBowl TLB. I'm guessing that's one of you guys.
That's me. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So there we go at 6. And then Gold Raz at 7. Matt at 8. Bro Cal, our buddy Calvin at 9, Duarte at 10, Diamond Mike at 11, and Retro Croach, who is already in the chat, is there at 12. I'm actually going to go ahead and get the draft started. And then we are going to talk specifically about RazzBowl. And I want to start by saying I only made this draft 15 rounds because, as everybody knows, I like to keep the show strictly at an hour. However, the actual RazzBowl itself is 20 rounds. But Matt, I think you were the designated rule teller. So why don't you break down some of these rules? Because like I said, when I did my research, you guys are running a tournament that's a lot different than some of the other tournaments out there.
Yeah, so buzz me if I'm getting close, or you can pause it so I don't end up with AT Perry.
Oh no, you're gonna learn the hard way. Mock drafting and live streaming at the same time is a nightmare, which is why I don't draft. But it is only a mock draft, so if you screw it up,
well, there's your first surprise of the draft at number 2. But we'll get into that later. RazzBowl 6 is a best ball cut line championship format. One of the big differences you'll see from others, like Scott Fishbowl, is we are not super flex. We are position driven, 1 quarterback only, 1 tight end only, 2 running back, 3 receivers, a couple of flex, and then you're going to have a deep 11 on your bench. No kicker, no defense.
Yep.
6 point for passing touchdown, and kind of a little wrinkle, 6 points each for offensive kick return, offensive punt return, offensive fumble recovery, but we don't give any yardage. So special teams is probably throw a dart. If you hit, you hit. If not, it's probably no big deal. We have a deep bench, and the reason we do that is because we only offer fab weeks 1 through 10, and there's a total $10 budget, no $0 bids. So let me repeat that. You can make bids starting the week before kickoff and all the way through week 10. After that, there are no fab acquisitions allowed. Once you've spent your 10, you cannot, by rules, and the system will not allow it, place another bid because 0 bids are not allowed.
There you go.
So my gut tells me that you need to have a very healthy organization. You need to be ready to go, and you need to have depth at places you need to have depth. And by the way, I know it's my pick. I don't love everything about this pick. However, I have to start 2 of these guys, and in my opinion, this is the best player on the board.
There you go.
Because Derek did what Derek normally does when we're competing against each other, and Derek took my heartthrob pick of Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I'd say Derek talked about the surprise at CeeDee Lamb, or maybe that was you who talked about the surprise at CeeDee Lamb. I think the Amon-Ra over Justin Jefferson is an equal surprise, but we're going to come back to that later. I don't want to take anything away from these rules because, like I said, this is not a tournament I've ever competed in, and it's certainly not a rule set I've ever competed in. So.
Yeah, and here's so scoring, we call it better ball. You do not have to set your lineup weeks 1 through 10. The system does it. It knows who scored the most. Those are the points you get. If you make the cut, so if you're above the cut line for week 11, you are now setting your lineup for every week until you have been eliminated. Usually you need to be in the top 3, or you get put into a wild card, and the top 3 in the wild card will make it to the next round. One of the big keys is during that weeks 1 through 10, the more points you score, the better you're going to be, because the average of weeks 1 through 10 are added to your actual lineup score weeks 11 and on. So you get to account for all of your big numbers at the beginning of the season. They're factored into our algorithm, and those will be part of your week 11, 12, 13, etc. So big key is score as many points as you can weeks 1 through 10 with your standardized lineup, but the system will choose that for you. And then try to avoid injuries, make sure you have backups, and it will take care of itself. My finish ever was last year. I finished 9th, and I was out in front for most of that week 1 through 10. I was really, really doing well. The problem is that my playoff teams were not as good as they needed to be. I had, I think, did we have Nico Collins have an injury during the playoffs
Yes.
Our playoffs, week 11 and on? So
Yep.
I got a very low score from him. I had a quarterback that didn't play real well in the playoffs. So I started to slip at the end, but ended up 9th overall.
And if I remember correctly, you said you finished 9th. You said one of our drafters is last year's champion, correct?
Yes,
he is
Robert.
not. He did not make this draft unless Goldman. Did we get Robert Goldman in here?
Yes, he's drafted.
There he is. Yeah,
he's drafted
between
between us.
Derek and myself. Of course, that makes sense. He took.
So that's Gold Raz. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
There we go.
So Robert Goldman won. Actually, he won RazzBowl 3.
All 3.
We're going to have a pod with Robert and last year's winner Ken Zales or
Okay.
Zales. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. So we've got a pod coming up with them probably Wednesday evening, and we'll run through strategy with them as well. So we'll get you guys the link. You can tune into that on our YouTube page.
I want to throw up Retro Coach, who's clearly played in the tournament previously, and said he was surprised that they did not take advantage of the fab as often as they did, or he thought they would last year. So I do find that interesting, with there only being at most 10 transactions. And if you're really in on a guy, it's fewer than 10 transactions. But I would think fab would be hot during those first 10 weeks, especially because all the crazy stuff that happens between the draft and the start of the regular season. Derek, when I look at the scoring, maximizing those first 10 weeks seems very important. Is there a draft strategy to avoiding guys with the week 11, week 12 bye weeks in RazzBowl?
Well, for me, I like to space it out a little bit, because you're right. You know, when you get to,
or I guess I should have said that opposite, loading up on those guys so you maximize your points, but then you're missing them when you have to set your lineup. So
right,
it's a little more
that's
weird,
right.
So.
And if you know, with many other formats, you know, bye weeks are going to be killers. And typically there's always 1, maybe 2 bye weeks that are just really hard to get through. So in a better ball, you know, that it kind of tends to level that out a little bit. But I like, from me, I mean, I won't select a player just because of a bye week. You know, certainly top 10 rounds. But yeah, look at that. See, you're trying to get in my head here. But no,
I'm sure the computer would have made a great pick for you.
I try to space them out. I try to space out my bye weeks anyway, and that's really just the general philosophy. Because I don't ever want to be in that position where, you know, 1 week I'm just essentially throwing it away. I mean, certainly if you're in a head to head, you know, okay, that you could probably get away with that. But if you're, you know, you get into those playoff weeks and you're in a heavy bye week, I mean, you've really just almost wasted your whole season.
Yeah, Austin, looking at the scoring, it's very different than the underdog best ball drafts we've talked about previously. In my best ball drafts, I have noticed that I'm ending up with a lot of guys on bye in week 12 and week 14. It's clearly just the players that I like that are falling with those bye weeks. Hearing this rule set, Austin, does this, obviously we're going to talk a little bit later about week 17 correlation, but is there any other things that you would be looking for with this new rule set?
Yeah, I mean, right now, my initial instinct was to start looking for teams that don't have any bye weeks during the playoffs, which for this starts in week 11. So I went with ADP off the gate and got Tyreek Hill with Miami, and their bye week is much earlier. I think it's week 6. So you'll have Miami for the entire playoffs in this format. And I started just looking around at teams that Miami plays. So they play San Francisco in week 16. So that's a good correlation opportunity during the playoffs. San Francisco also has an early bye, as does Detroit, who plays San Francisco in week 17. So that's kind of my initial. I'm curious to see how this plays out in this draft, just to look at what happens when you prioritize, keeping the maximum number of players available during that playoff run where you really need those ceiling performance.
Now, Matt, to go back to the rule set, I have the rules in front of me, but I figure it's easier just to ask you. The playoffs, so they start in week 11. Is there a elimination cutoff line, or if you're in the playoffs, you're competing for those final 6 weeks against the other teams who have made the playoffs?
Every week is do or die. So you've got to finish in the top 3 in your division, or you've got to be in the wild card. If the next 3 will drop down to the wild card, and then you have to be in the top 3 of that to advance each week. So yeah, it's a guillotine-ish for the playoffs. So again, you've got to be cognizant about setting your lineup. You've got to ensure that you have insulated yourself from injury. And that goes back to a little bit of the only reason I'm doing this is because strategy is important. People want to learn from us. So I'm going to share a big piece of strategy that has worked well for me over the years. And that is, at minimum, you should come out of this draft with 3 quarterbacks and 3 tight ends. Because if you have one that is benched, or you have one that is dinged or injured or out, you need to have that backup plan going into the playoffs. So even though it's a 1 quarterback, 1 tight end league, if you notice, there's been 3 tight ends that have gone already.
Tight ends are going early.
In Scott Fishbowl, they're going in the first round, make that 4 tight ends. It's important to have them, not necessarily this early, but it's important to have them because you are going to need that insulation and that depth when the playoffs start. You don't want to be playing Will Levis in weeks 14, 15, 16 if you can stay away from that, right? You'd rather have a Kirk Cousins, or you'd rather have maybe even a Deshaun Watson or somebody like that as your quarterback too, running into those playoff weeks. So yeah, insulate yourself, protect yourself, and know that even though it looks weird to have 3 tight ends and 3 quarterbacks, remember, you don't have kickers, you don't have defense, deep bench. So grab your guys when you can get them and make sure that you have protected yourself. Again,
one other thing I want to add, while Matt's getting ready to make his pick, with the cut line format, we talked about bye weeks and how do you, and we're talking about playoffs, but you got to get to the playoffs first.
Yes. Always say that. Always get there and then worry about that.
Yes. So, and that's why I like the balanced approach, like I talked about, is because, if you worry too much about the playoffs, you might have trouble getting there. Now if you do and you're set up for it, then you're in a great spot. But and also with the added points, you're adding on to your points for the year. You want to have a pretty high score in the first 10 weeks. So if you load up your buys in the first 10 weeks and you make the playoffs, you may not last as long because you've lost a lot of points in the beginning. So. There's a lot of strategies there with the cut line to keep in mind.
I like that.
And Derek and I did the math, I think 2 days ago. We did the math talking about this very issue of bye weeks and playoffs. Even though your score can be front loaded, which could help you at the back end, you're not going to be able to avoid buys in the playoffs. After week 10, there are 16 teams over a 4-week span that are on their bye. Arizona, Carolina, Giants, Buccaneers, Falcons, Bills, Bengals, Jags, Saints, Jets, Ravens, Broncos, Texans, Colts, Patriots, Commanders. Of that list, there's maybe 3 that aren't super fantasy relevant, but guess what? They're going to be fantasy relevant in your playoffs.
Plus, A.T. Perry is on bye with those Saints, so we know that's a problem.
He absolutely is. The great and all-knowing A.T. Perry will be on.
You brought up the tight ends, and I find that interesting. We're going to recap the first couple of rounds here in a second. I have a couple of questions about the draft that's already taken place. But you brought up the tight ends, and I wonder if this might be a product. I chose Sleepers, single QB, PPR, ADP. And Austin and I talk about this all the time whenever we talk about underdog, is the underdog ADP is wildly different than the sleeper ADP. I've been doing a lot of underdog drafts. Tight ends are not going this early right now in underdog. This draft is on NFFC, correct? So we're going to be dealing with one of the things I always tell folks is get familiar with the website where you're going to be doing the drafting, especially if you've never done a draft there, Matt. So if you want to talk a little bit about just the host of the tournament, anything you can throw in there.
Yeah, thank you to Greg Ambrosius and Jeff Stein for hosting us for free. I think the key for that is just understand that you have to not only set your lineup, but you have to click the green save button as well.
Ooh, see, I love that.
Yeah, and to me, that's the one mistake I see folks making is that they don't get after that save button. And I'm going to tell you right now. So I'm on the clock. I don't love how this has played out. I love that a bear went before me, as you can see by the hat. I'm usually a wide receiver load up guy, and I had chances to do it. You can see that in the draft. I could have.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that I've got my 2 running backs. I'm good with that for right now. And I'm going to avoid a wide receiver that I don't necessarily love. No, I do love this guy. I'm going to go with the guy that I think.
You changed your mind mid sentence.
I think he has the ability to be a wide receiver 1A this year. Yeah. I like Devonta Smith, and he certainly is not going to make it back around to me. So I'm all and look at Goldman. Goldman is using the strategy that I've used in the past. Yeah. He's going to be very difficult. People are going to be chasing those numbers. That's a really good start for him. I like to see how he's going to round out with his running backs, but he's somewhat zero running back. And when he does that, look at the names he's able to round out with. And I bet you in the long run, you're going to be impressed by the roster that he puts together, because it's a strategy I've employed before. But my gut says you're going to need a little bit more running back depth this year. So we'll see how he gets to those names at the end. And if he gets sniped by anybody, and look at his bookends, right? It's Derek and I. So we know he's nervous. There's no doubt.
I love that. Club Fantasy Zone, Joel Worth, highly approving of the 0 running back strategy. I just did an underdog draft yesterday where I went 0 running back, not my normal draft. It was very uncomfortable for me. So I'll be interested to see how Goldman's able to, and we'll come back and take a look at his draft. One other thing I'll throw in for NFFC. NFFC runs a lot of high stakes tournaments. A lot of folks live and die by their ADP because of the stakes that are always up there. So I think you guys are probably, for RazzBowl, going to have some of the most accurate ADP out there. Without further ado, as everybody who has watched this show before knows, I'm going to recap the first 3 rounds. This is the only full draft recap I'm going to do. We're not going to talk about every team. We're not going to talk about every pick, but I am going to let these guys talk about their teams at the end. But I do like to focus on the first 3 rounds, because you could make an argument that the first 3 rounds kind of set the tone for the rest of your draft, as we were just talking about Gold Raz at the 7 spot. So the draft starts off with Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Breece Hall, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, AJ Brown, Puka Nacua. Nothing too out of the ordinary there. Now, seeing these tight ends pop up in round 2, we start off with Saquon Barkley, Travis Kelce at the 2nd spot, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Devontae Adams, Chris Olave, Drake London, Travis Etienne, Sam Laporta, Brandon Ayuk, Devon Achane, and Derrick Henry rounds out round 2. Jumping into round 3, we go Mike Evans, a best ball favorite, Trey McBride, Jalen Waddle, Deebo Samuel, Mark Andrews. So as they've already pointed out, 4 tight ends off the board. Kieran Williams starting to fall a little bit, falls to the 3rd round. We've seen him in the 2nd previously. Michael Pittman, Josh Jacobs, Nico Collins, Isaiah Pacheco, and then we round out the 3rd round with the first 2 quarterbacks off the board, Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. Really, guys, when I look at these first 3 rounds, I don't see any major surprises. So I'm actually going to start you guys with the question that I had queued up. Josh put Tyreek Hill on the thumbnail. So this is a little bit of a Tyreek Hill question, but this is more about Justin Jefferson. And you guys were very influential on what happened with Justin Jefferson in this draft. So I'm actually going to go ahead and start with you, Derek, because you made this first call. When I look at these wide receivers, everybody looks at it as a big 4. Clearly you do not, but CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and now obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown. The question about this is, Justin Jefferson is going into a situation with a very unproven quarterback, but he is also Justin Jefferson. So my original question was literally written out, should he automatically be the wide receiver 4? Derek, I think you have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I'm a little bit down on. I'm not that worried, honestly. But to me, when it came between the two of them, as Matt kind of alluded to, Amon-Ra St. Brown has been a favorite of mine, since he came into the league. So it's hard.
Derek with the first time out.
Oh, sorry, I caught you right on your draft pick.
Oh, you did. That's all right. I'll take that pick.
There you go. Just make sure you take yourself off of auto. So,
Let me find that there. So, he's been a favorite of mine all along. And what, as you're alluding to, I mean, I don't mind Jefferson. I'm not that worried about his situation. I mean, he's Justin Jefferson. He's going to get his looks. He's going to, you could throw the ball within 5 feet of him. He's going to make the catch. So, you get to give him a quarterback that can at least get him the ball in the vicinity. He's going to come down with it 9 times out of 10. So I'm not that worried about him, but just overall, I like the situation in Detroit better than Minnesota. They've got the weapons, they've got the offense in place. In a big factor is their offensive coordinator is back. And that's been such a positive for that offense. And on Amon-Ra St. Brown in particular. So I just think overall, I like his upside better. And when it comes down to the first round, which player has the greatest possibility of returning that value? And I just think St. Brown is a little bit more likely to do that than Jefferson.
Austin, I'm going to kick it over to you because, again, you were influential on how this whole thing went down. You said you went with ADP. I didn't get a chance to look at the ADP ahead of time. Has Tyreek Hill jumped Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson in ADP at this point?
Yeah, on Sleeper, he was the number 2 ranked player overall. Okay. So CD Lamb going ahead of him was actually a little bit out of ADP.
Interesting. Yeah.
I ended up going with Tyreek Hill just because of the passing volume that I think he's going to continue to get. I'm a little nervous about it because Miami has a history of kind of falling off towards the end of the year. So for this format, you really want them to perform well all throughout the season. But honestly, my pick was between him and Justin Jefferson. I'm not necessarily going out of my way to pick Jamar Chase in the top 3. I feel better about him at the 4th or 5th spot. So I feel like, to me, it's just a toss up between CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and Justin Jefferson.
And then, Matt, you were happy to see a running back fall to you there, though I think you were a little sad about Amon-Ra St. Brown. Should all of these wide receivers be going ahead of Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson, or do you think the running back should start to creep into these top wide receivers?
So my draft board, if I could paint it perfectly for me, would be McCaffrey, Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Wow.
Followed by
the folks
Chase.
over at RazzBowl, high on the sun god. I love it.
No, for sure. I will go on record now as saying there's a high probability that he ends up as the wide receiver 1 and finishes number 2 behind McCaffrey overall.
Okay.
Breece Hall would be drafted by me before Jefferson because I don't know who JJ McCarthy is. None of us really do. And then I would probably throw Jefferson right before Bijan and go from there.
So Jefferson behind Chase as well?
Yes. I have Jefferson as my number 5, solidly at number 5.
Okay. I love that I did this entire thing as if Jefferson should be the wide receiver 4, and I have 2 guests who are like, no, he should be the wide receiver 5. So definitely not the path I expected this to go. I'll start with you, Derek. Did any other of these first 3 rounds, any of these early picks jump out to you? If you don't have one that comes to mind, are we surprised about the tight ends and quarterbacks going this early?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm a little surprised at the tight ends. We had 4 go in the first 3 rounds. A little surprised that they've got that helium right now. I think starting tight ends in the 3rd round makes a little more sense than, Kelsey right after the turn in 2. That's a little early for me. I think we're going to see a little bit of a drop off with him. I mean, age has to catch up there. So to think that he's the 14th pick in the draft still, I would much rather wait and take, someone like even McBride, as the 3rd tight end, Andrews, Kincaid, any of them I would take and not waste that. I say waste. I mean, it's not a waste of pick to take Travis Kelce, but there's so many other names there that are going to probably be more helpful, and you still get a really top tight end, you know,
20
a little
seconds,
bit
Derek.
later. So,
yeah, don't time out again, Derek.
Yeah, don't be that guy.
no, that's all right. I'm good. So yeah,
Derek, give my draft a quick peek and tell me absolutely if you would ever think you'd see that draft from me.
Yeah,
ever.
no.
Well, I love that you pointed out you tend to eschew running backs for wide receivers, but yet we still have 2 0 running back drafts going on here. Our own Austin and the former champion RazzBowl there, Gold Raz. So this is going to be interesting to see the game of. Never mind. Austin has ruined the game of chicken as I'm speaking here. So never mind. It'll be interesting to see that play out. Matt, go ahead and jump in there. Do any of these first 3 rounds, our picks in these first 3 rounds stand out to you?
I will tell you that I'm with Derek. I don't know that Kelsey is a first round pick anymore, and I don't know that he's the 2.2 either. Now, with that, right, he is a stud tight end. He plays like a wide receiver at times. The part that really surprises me outside of Kelsey, let's just put an asterisk next to maybe he was too early, is the fact that I for sure have in the past at the 4 or 5 turn where I have normally drafted my first tight end and sometimes my second, especially if I'm on the end, Shia or the retro, if I can get the 2 studs. Now, here's what happened. Coming down in 5, I had Ingram, I had Pitts, and I had Njoku ready to go. When Ingram went, I saw, okay, well, Pitts will probably slide, Njoku will probably slide. And look, I took a better overall player at a thinner position, Aaron Jones. I love that pick. I think he's the bell cow in there if he can stay healthy. And then look, not only did Pitts and Njoku go before I came back up again, but so did Jake Ferguson. So the struggle for me now will be, where do I get tight end 1 production? And where am I going to get number 2 and number 3 that I've already lauded? I have to have 3 of them. So this is a little, I'm uncomfortable. I'm short of saying I hate my build. But then I look at the names and I'm like, these are solid, fantastic fantasy players. But now I've got an issue. I've got to fix my issue without overpaying. And so that's what I'll be looking to do.
I'm just going to subtitle what Matt's saying there. This is why we mock draft, because you got to figure out where that tight end drop off exists. And it seems like it's existing right here. I love that you're bringing up Travis Kelce. I'm a huge favorite of Travis Kelce, but I do feel like he's going earlier than what I expected him to go after the kind of fall off we saw a little bit last year. I always used to joke, Travis Kelce in the second feels great until you see, Evan Ingram go 5 rounds later or Kyle Pitts go 5 rounds later. Austin, we haven't talked a lot about how you're approaching tight ends in best ball this year. This is not what's happening on Underdog. Is this just far too early for these tight ends?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been interesting. I think the tight ends have fallen on Underdog this year. I have the ADP pulled up so that I can speak more specifically to it, but I think it depends. There's one thing about Underdog is, again, it's half PPR scoring, whereas this RazzBowl is going to be full PPR scoring. So that has a slight difference there. Kind of helps out a guy like Evan Ingram, moves him up the board. But I do feel like there's still a value in taking a tight end early, particularly in this format. But it's kind of like I'm picking an either or. I'm either taking a really solid tight end early, or I'm just going to wait and punt the position and try and get 3 guys who I think might have some good touchdown upside later on in the draft, which is a very similar approach to what I'll do on Underdog as well.
And Matt's the only one right now who is in the punt the position, though he admits he doesn't want to be there. I missed it. Yep, I was trying to look at it on the little screen as I get to the big screen. So Matt and Derek both waiting on tight end, and then with you guys being 3 picks apart and knowing each other so well, that's going to be interesting. Speaking of knowing each other so well, Goldman points out, Matt, 4 running backs, not what he expected to see from you.
No, and I didn't. So Goldman and Robert and I had a quick discussion yesterday on the Twitter machine about my rankings for wide receiver versus his, and he said we were off. We were off. He disagreed, which I love. That's why we mock. That's why we put out lists and we tell people this is my thought versus, and let me hear yours. I would be very interested to hear where Robert is, where he differs from my list, and get some feedback on that. But yeah, this is not a typical build for me. I've got 4 running backs and I have 3 receivers, it makes me I'm queasy. I don't know why it's happening, but it is. And I'm going to give you some feedback on my next pick when it comes real quick. So if you look at the board the way it is, when I took Hollywood Brown, and I'll wait for Brocal to draft so that I don't.
Hollywood Brown, who has thrown the whole world off on Sleeper by having his first initial as an H, which none of us expected Sleeper to make that change, and it freaked me out the first time I saw it. So.
Well, if you look, when it came to me and Hollywood Brown, I had 2 receivers. I love receivers. I will never hide that. I wanted Kyler Murray, and then I noticed Kyler Murray and Jordan Love were both available. So my strategy is I looked at the board. Mahomes, Hurts, Allen at the bottom.
Yeah.
And Brocal didn't have a quarterback. So Brocal could have taken either one of those. The likelihood of the guys at the end selecting a second quarterback this early was slim to none. So now I will go with the NFL MVP for 2024.
I love it.
In Jordan Love.
No, I think it's a great pick. Love is a guy I'm targeting in all of my best ball drafts because I'm also very much in on that offense. Offense.
Yep.
Austin,
and the point being, look at the draft board, right? You can't pay attention to your rankings and you can't pay attention to your ADP and your Q. You have to understand where is the draft headed. And I knew my gut says nobody else is taking a second quarterback. So if I have 2, give me the player I need more than the quarterback. And that's it. It worked. It didn't work in tight end earlier. So I will learn from that, but it worked for my quarterback.
No, I absolutely thank you. That's the whole point of the show is learn through mock drafting. And that's something you can take away is watch what other people are going to do. You can kind of predict how they're going to proceed. And that gives you the ability to be a little bit more flexible with your pick. Don't force the quarterback. If you love either one and you know only one's going to go after you, as long as it works out the way you want it to, it's going to work out really well for you. Austin, I want to pivot to a topic that I know you are very, very adamant about, and that is week 17 correlation. And because I've done so many shows with you, I'm now adamant about it. And so I kind of went through, Austin, and broke down the week 15, 16, and 17 matchups that I thought were great for fantasy football and something I want to target in best ball. With this being better ball, does any of that change for you where you'll be setting your own lineups, or the fact of the matter is you still need teams in these championship rounds that have great matchups? So are you still going to look at week 17 correlation, even though it's only best ball for the first 10 weeks of the season?
Yeah, I will. I'm going to de-emphasize it, though, more than what I would typically do. So in a typical underdog DraftKings format, I'm looking at that very heavily. I'll want like 5 players in the same matchup in week 17 and try and take a similar approach for weeks 15 and 16. For this, because you're averaging through across the whole season, I still want to have that correlation because I want to bet on teams and games that are going to go off later in the season to help me actually win the tournament and not just, finish second place, since there's no prizes for second in this format. I still want to give myself access to that upside, but I'm going to be a little bit more balanced. But either way, the kind of premise of week 17 correlation is not just like, oh, I'm saying whatever, I don't care about my lineup weeks 1 through 14. I'm only caring about week 17. It's saying I'm betting on teams who are going to pop off all season and they're going to have a ceiling matchup in week 17. And so that kind of mindset, I think, still applies here, where you want to bet on teams that are on offenses that are going to be productive throughout the season.
And so that's exactly what I did. I didn't just go look at week 17 for quote unquote important matchups. I went for teams that I thought were going to have high fantasy value, and then took it as, do they have great matchups in those weeks? And I also tried to factor in weather. So there were times where I discluded teams like Cincinnati and Cleveland because I know what they're going to be playing in. It could obviously work out for their running backs, but it might not work out for their passing game. But Austin, the 2 teams with this in mind that I wanted to bring up to you are San Francisco and Houston. These are 2 offenses everybody wants a part of, and they are the only 2 teams that I think have favorable matchups for all 3 of those weeks, 15, 16, and 17. Are those players that you find yourself targeting? And then I guess it gets a little hard to target players when they have very, very popular players. Are there some low-key guys that you should look for at the end of a draft at some of these offenses?
Yeah, so I fully agree with that. First off, on Houston and San Francisco, they have some really interesting matchups. And Interestingly, they both play Miami in weeks 15, 16, 17. So you can also sprinkle in some Miami players and you go ahead and you double dip. You get that week 15 and week 16 correlation. So those are teams I'm looking for. But to your point, it's hard to get a ton of bites at the apple with those teams. So there's some other teams that I think are very interesting. The Rams have some good players that are falling very low on ADP, and they have what I think should be an interesting matchup with Arizona. One of my favorite kind of trios of teams to target is the Green Bay, Minnesota, Seattle, and I guess it's more than a trio because I would throw Chicago in there as well. Like all those teams play each other. Chicago plays Minnesota, Detroit, and Seattle. And there's some mixing and matching happening between those other three. I love those because there's some players spread throughout all of ADP for those 4 teams, and they all play each other in those kind of final 3 weeks of the season. So there's some interesting strategies you can get there. And I guess at this point, like I would just also promote summer school because we're going to go through each week 16, week 17 matchup and talk about the teams that we really like there and why you should stack them and how you should go about that.
There you go. That's Austin's newest show. Austin, I know you guys said on last night's show that's going to be a Friday show, but we're also thinking about moving this to a Friday show. Is that going to stay a Friday show, or is it going to take our spot on Saturday at some point? Do you know yet?
It's gonna swap. So it's Friday for now, and we'll let you know when that changes.
Perfect. And then, guys, to go on Austin's point, or to kind of maybe move away from Austin's point for Derek and Matt, in your history with RazzBowl, do you have a lot of people who come in with a best ball mindset and you find it blows up in their face, or people with a best ball mindset and it works out well for them? Is that something you guys have noticed among the RazzBowl community? Either one of you who wants to get started?
So I haven't had access to the site to track the history, and a lot of that has gone away. But the people I played with in my division have not seemed to plan appropriately, right? Either the quarterbacks they draft too early, or they don't feel, they end up with 2 running backs, and one of them is a backup, and they don't have the peanut butter spread lineup where they've got enough coverage everywhere. And by the way, in the past, my plan has been, and I mentioned this at the beginning, I'm going to get players that I know are going to start at running back, quarterback, tight end. I'm good with them. I want my bench littered with wide receivers. And as an example, I will tell you that the retro coach at the end, Puka, Zay, Brian Thomas, who I think is going to be the #1 rookie wide receiver this year, are all great picks. But that Jameson Williams pick at the end of round 9 is the perfect better ball candidate. He can go off with 1 catch or 1 reverse, and he can win the week as a wide receiver, 2 or 3 for you, and stay in your lineup during the better ball portion. And then you decide, is he getting enough love on the offensive end during the playoffs where I have the guts to start him? Or
I was just going to say, do you have the courage to start Jameson Williams will be the question.
So he's a player that you have to look at the splits. And the splits, I mean, are weeks 1 through 10 and week 11 and after, and determine, do I have the guts to start this guy, or am I just happy that he gave me a couple of big games, right? He's like Mike Evans light, really, 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 really light. But you're waiting for the Mike Evans.
Like Mike Evans half?
Yeah. You're looking for the 6 catches, 215, and 3 touchdowns for Mike Evans. And when those happen, you're going to move up the leaderboard. And then you can start Evans otherwise. The issue is, do you have the guts to start Jameson Williams? Does he get 1 target a week? Does he get 9 targets a week? We don't know. Is he getting 3 rushes? We don't know any of those things. And it's important to know those as they happen.
Yep. I'll give you a second to make your pick there. Derek, looking at your team, you didn't really grab any of those, like, let's make the better best ball guys, like Brian Thomas, like Gabe Davis. And it could just be that these guys aren't available yet. Like they may come up to you later. The fact that you have to start to set your lineup, does that kind of scare you off some of those more sketchy guys?
I hate this draft.
No, because what'd you say, Matt?
I said I hate this draft. Look at all the green on my board. It's absolutely horrific.
Yeah,
like, I won't be able to sleep tonight. It's just brutal.
Derek, I'll give you a second to make your pick. But yeah, I guess my question to you is, while you're making that pick, is I love that Matt brought up, Jameson Williams is an interesting guy in best ball, but it gets a little scarier when I have to depend on Jameson Williams. But I do love that Detroit offense. And I think the statistics are, we all know Jared Goff in a dome is exactly what you want. And I think like 13 of his games this year are in a dome. So it's an insane number this year.
Yeah. Now, to the point, I look for that as well, but I tend to look for it a little bit later. And it just minimizes the risk, like you're talking about when you get to the point in the season where you're setting your lineups. If I'm taking a chance on my second flex, I'm okay with that. I mean, because at that point, we're all doing that to some degree anyway. So if I have my set starters and I have, maybe my running back 2 or a wide receiver 3 or one of my flex spots where, are you playing someone like a Jameson Williams or do I start Gabe Davis over some? I'm okay with that because that's the right decision. But if you're having to make those decisions with your frontline starters, those positions on your roster where you need to have points, that's where it gets a little nervous for me. So I tend to do that as well, but I look a little bit later in the draft to do that.
Yeah, look for the lottery tickets at the end. And, Goldman is just your biggest fan right now, Matt. He's making you feel better. He said it's just a mock. You don't need to hate the draft that much. So.
Thank goodness, right?
Yeah, they're to help you.
I'll write him a check at the end of the draft.
There you go.
For therapy. I appreciate him.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just weird, right? You do what the draft tells you to do. And for me,
what comes to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't love it. But can I start with Dallas Goedert? Sure. Can I play Tyjae Spears at a flex? Sure. And the first 10 weeks, it's going to do it for me. I don't have to have anxiety over the first 10 weeks. I watch the box score. Oh, Tyjae Spears fell into the end zone twice. Yeah. Great. It works. But guess what? Come playoff time, he's not going to start over Kamara or Aaron Jones or Bijan Robinson or Josh Jacobs. So I'm good with that in the middle rounds.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Folks, I will scroll the board here in just a minute. So I'm going to leave the top half on the board here because I always tell you guys, I think the top half of the board, probably the most important half of the board. Before I scroll and start to look for some interesting picks in the second half of the draft, I wanted to ask you guys about the quarterbacks. We spent a lot of time on the tight ends. The quarterbacks all went, I guess, about a round later. And you guys, everyone in this draft waited on their quarterback. Is that the strategy, Derek? Whereas we saw Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, people who wanted to get their guy, but there's also a lesson to be learned on the end. You need to get your guy because he's probably not coming back to you. Whereas we saw the converse of that on the Jordan Love, Kyler Murray debate. So is quarterback early something that can work from the right draft slot, or is that just something you're not going to do, Derek?
Yeah, I mean, it can, but in a draft setup like this, I tend to wait, because we don't have a premium on quarterbacks. It's not a super flex. There aren't, overly favorable quarterback pointing scoring. So there's enough quarterbacks that, you can wait, it's certainly in super flex or some others. You want to look for the running quarterbacks, and that brings them up. RazzBowl is not going to be one of those, in my opinion. Yeah. And so, you can wait. And I waited for, Joe Burrow, and I'm happy with that, because it allows me to load up on other, premium position players and still get who should be one of the top quarterbacks out there. So, in this case, it doesn't surprise me that Hurts at the end of 3 was the first one to go. For me, I'm looking in the 5-6 range before I'm even seriously considering it, because there's just so many other talented players out there for fantasy that are going to have more value in the long run, because you can, tag team 2 quarterbacks in maybe like 6 and 8 or 7 and 9. And for a best ball, the probability of one of those 2 is going to have a really good week is pretty high. So I tend to wait.
And Matt, you're employing that same strategy right now, but is there a point? For me, I always joke that if there's a stud there in the 4th round, I have to take them. And you guys kind of eschew that. You let Jordan Love, you let Dak Prescott, you let Joe Burrow slide past that round with no problem whatsoever. Is that tend to be the strategy you employ as well, Matt?
For me, you've got 12 teams, single quarterback league. write down your top 12 quarterbacks, whether it be your analysis, your ADP, your gut, all of those things factor in. And if you're happy with the number one guy and you love him and that's how you want to root for your fantasy football team all year, take your guy when you can get your guy. Derek, what's the statement we always make? Get your guy. Sometimes if you don't get your guy, you hate your team all year. So get your guy when it feels comfortable. But if you want to really be rounded in your roster, take the guy when he is affordable, and know that if you are good with Josh Allen all the way down to Jordan Love, Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, then just wait. But if you do wait, make sure you don't screw it up and wait one round too many and you've lost the last of the guys. To me, that's a big key.
Austin, when I look at this draft, this just stands out to me. Now, we obviously started our season with a bunch of dynasty drafts, and I think everything we've been doing since then is super flex. So this might be our first true like one QB redraft that we're seeing. And it's, I don't want to use the word alarming, but it's alarming to me to see these stud quarterbacks falling. For someone who drafts the way I do, I love to see it. Austin, is this the norm? Are we going to see guys like Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud in the 6th round, Kyler Murray and Jordan Love that much later? Because if you do, I feel like taking Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen with those early picks is a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, it is actually something we're seeing more often. So if we're looking at a site like Underdog Fantasy, Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts are actually at a lower ADP than where they went in this draft. Josh Allen isn't being drafted until the beginning of the 4th round, which is right around where he was, but it is a little bit early. Jalen Hurts is kind of getting closer to the middle of the 4th round on Underdog. And I think, to me, that's more a symptom of the fact that people are putting such a high priority on elite receivers now, because having an elite receiver is becoming so fundamental to fantasy football lineups. I do think that, it depends on the format. It depends on the strategy. Like with the rushing upside, I still think guys like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson can be game changers. But in a setup like this, where you also you're not getting like a premium for passing touchdowns, anything like that, you can still benefit by just waiting on your quarterback and getting a guy that's going to be pretty high volume throughout the season. And there's still some valuable dual threat quarterbacks, like Kyler Murray going in the 7th round is one that really sticks out to me whenever you're seeing Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts going in the 3rd.
I'm going to ask live on air right now. This draft is running a little slower than our drafts normally run. Matt, Derek, do you guys have a hard out at noon? We're likely to run over. I just don't want to keep you guys. Okay, perfect. Because I had a couple more questions, but normally I would be starting our draft recap right now, and it's running much slower. I do want to throw Retro Coach, who has some experience with RazzBowl, up on the screen. He said he saw Josh Allen has the week 12 bye, which was also a double negative for Josh Allen. You don't normally hear bad things about Josh Allen ever when it comes to this. So I do find that interesting. And since we are not on a time limit, I'm going to scroll back up to the top of the draft, because normally I don't have you guys talk about your teams before we get to the end of the draft, but Matt and Goldman's in the chat as well. Seeing the focus on elite wide receivers, and I always bring this up, I love the color coding on Sleeper, because even if you can't see the player names from home right now, you can see the immense amount of blue at the top half of this draft. Matt, a common draft strategy is zig when they zag. Is that kind of where you're seeing these elite running backs just continually falling to you because everybody else is focusing on the wide receiver?
Yes. And Goldman has a very significant place in my draft. What he does and what Derek does in front and what I think Brocal's going to do behind is going to move my draft in one direction or the other. And for me, when I scroll down, and I love his 4 receivers, don't get me wrong, Goldman, but I ask in a bubble, would you rather have Bijan and Josh Jacobs with Devontae Adams and Devonta Smith, or would you rather have Justin Jefferson, Chris Olave, Najee Harris, and Javonte Williams? To me, it's a no-brainer. Yeah. I take those elite running backs ahead of the other receivers. Now, Robert's got 3 flex play positions he can play with. So Pittman and Metcalf's probably better than Aaron Jones and Alvin Kamara, but you never know. And elite running backs usually don't play the full season. That's the scary part for me, is so I had to start loading up on extra running backs to make sure. And if this draft went 22 rounds, right, I'd be looking at Ty Chandler to back up Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
I'd be looking at the young man in Tennessee to back up Tyjae Spears. But for the most part, I'm happy with mine. I like Goldman's. I love Derek's build as well. I will say that you mentioned quarterbacks. Look at round 9, pick 10. And I think right now that could be the absolute steal of the draft.
My gosh, I didn't even notice that.
And then he comes back at 10-3. The only concern I have for Duarte is he's got Mahomes, Herbert, and Lawrence. Did he give up too much draft capital to land those 3 quarterbacks?
Yeah, there's an overinvestment at quarterback there. Me and Austin have often talked about the fall of Trevor Lawrence, which we're seeing in this draft, and then Herbert seems to be following that. Derek, I'll just ask you, is there too much concern about that Chargers offense that we are letting Justin Herbert, who is almost a perennial top 10 quarterback, plummet in these fantasy drafts because of an offense we really haven't even seen yet?
Well, that's someone else's value. And so I tend to be one who, if you're going to give me a value on a player with that skill, I'll take it, hopefully as my quarterback too. I'll take that. There's certainly right to be concerned about the Chargers offense and what that's going to look like. I mean, importing the 2 Baltimore running backs, which I took one of them, you'll see, I'm not that happy about that, but there's a lot of talent there. Is it going to come together?
You mean the Chargers running backs?
Yeah. Well, they're Charger running backs now, but they were from, they came from Baltimore.
Yeah.
But I'm not as worried, I think, as maybe the ADP showing others is on the Chargers. I think they'll be all right. Are they, Super Bowl contenders? No, probably not. But there's enough skill there, and you noticed I took their rookie wide receiver as well as an upshot play, and I think there's potential there. So I'm okay with taking the value. If you're going to give me value for someone like Justin Herbert or even Trevor Lawrence, who went right after, I'll take that. I'll take that every day.
And Austin, I'm just going to draw your attention to the Duarte kind of Caleb Williams corner here. No offense to Retro Coach, he just didn't take a quarterback in this set. Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, and Caleb Williams, kind of the new hotness, going right in the same group as the old and busted, which is hilarious calling these 2 old. But just to use a Men in Black reference there, these guys are guys who are plummeting, but Caleb Williams not seeing the hype that you would expect him to see. Do you expect any form of this ADP to hold once redraft season kind of kicks off in August?
I would be surprised. I think once we see Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence, all those training camp clips start coming out, and same with Caleb Williams, then we'll see them move up the board. I will say it's a little bit more surprising with Caleb Williams, but I'm curious if part of the thing that's driving down Justin Herbert in particular is the lack of good options to stack with him.
So in a best ball format. Okay.
Because just drawing a note, we talked about Jalen Hurts going ahead of ADP. Diamond Mike mentioned in the sleeper chat that he took him where he did to complete his AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts stack. And so that's something that people are probably doing here. But the ADP doesn't force you to take Justin Herbert much earlier than where he's going right now to complete any of those stacks. So it could be that that's part of what's going down for him, but I think I do agree he's a value right now, and I think we've been saying it pretty consistently all offseason, the fact that just because Jim Harbaugh is there and it's going to run the ball doesn't mean he's not going to be a productive fantasy quarterback.
No, I think that's a really, really good point. Guys, we play a game called Keep Trade Cut every single week where I try to find interesting picks that I think is going to drive Austin absolutely crazy. Austin, I don't think this one is going to drive you as crazy as they normally do. I always make Austin start, guys, but it's just I like to look for interesting things in the draft. And the one that has been catching my attention for a long while now, and this is a best ball format, not quite super flex, but even in super flex, Bryce Young has been falling to depths unheard of. for a former first round pick. And it kind of happened here again, where Bryce Young is going behind, Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Matt Stafford. And I know that these guys are far more established, but I want to talk about the guys who went in his round, Austin. JJ McCarthy and Drake May, first round picks, but not the first overall pick. Also not established starters. They went about 5 picks after Bryce Young. Bryce Young is the Panther starter. So I'm going to have you keep trade cut Bryce Young, Drake May, JJ McCarthy. Austin.
You just find a way to get me on these every time without even meaning to. I had forgotten that this was a thing, that this was a segment, and then you mentioning it now, I just like super shook by it. This is also me just stalling to figure out what the heck I'm going to say about this. I think I'm going to keep Bryce Young because, to your point, he's the only one with a guaranteed job week 1. I guess I'm going to cut Drake May because I feel like he has.
Wow, I would have not expected that.
I think he has higher potential to not start for a long time.
Okay.
I think that New England has infrastructure to be a little bit patient and to have Jacoby Brissett up there, and they don't have the offensive infrastructure that I think would support a rookie quarterback, and I think they might be careful to not just ruin a rookie quarterback at the gate. And so I'm going to trade JJ McCarthy. But that's kind of like how I rank them a little bit. And just this season alone, Dynasty is a different conversation, but I think JJ McCarthy is more likely to play sooner than Drake May is.
And I always reiterate, keep trade cut is the name of the game. There are no trades in RazzBowl, but Derek, I'll have you go ahead and get us started. Keep trade cut, Drake May, JJ McCarthy, Bryce Young.
Yeah, I'll start with the cut, and I agree with Austin. I'm going to cut Drake May in a redraft. If this was a dynasty, I think my answer would be different. But for this year, I just don't see. Here, I'm going to make my pick here.
I was going to say, I did that. I should have definitely went to Matt first.
I was ready. So, yeah, I just don't see, the upside. Yeah, he may start, he may not. The talent on that team is lacking. Even if he starts, what are you going to get this year? And just looking at this year. So I think for me, he would be the easy cut. I'm going to keep McCarthy because, again, he may not start right away, but he's going to play. And when he does, he has the weapons in place to be successful. Even if he just turns out to be a game manager, he's got the weapons to really be maybe Kirk Cousins light this year, and Kirk Cousins light is playable in fantasy, especially in this format. So I'll take that, and then I'll trade Young. I think he'll be all right, and he'll certainly be better than last year, but I'm certainly not quite in his camp yet. I'll just put it that way.
I think that's fair. Matt, you know the question at this point?
I'm going to remind me, it's keep, trade, and what?
Keep, trade, cut. So the point of this game is the guy you love the most, the guy who you think he has the most value, and then you have to get rid of somebody.
So I'm going to keep Bryce Young. The other guys have mentioned it. Guaranteed starter. He has some pretty solid weapons, right? They traded for Deontay Johnson. In fact, we're done here at around 15.
Yep.
I have Jatavian Sanders in my queue.
Love that.
If it would come back in 16 and we were still going, he'd probably be my pick. I think he's going to be volume. And I watched him at University of Texas when I lived in the San Antonio area. He's a freak athlete. He's a big dude, great hands, great range. So he would probably be rostered by me. And I'm going to cut. Oh my goodness. I'm going to have to get rid of Drake May and trade McCarthy.
Yeah. I think with McCarthy being tied to Jefferson, it makes a lot of sense. I was shocked to hear Austin say he'd cut Drake May just because of the fights Austin and I had over Drake May during draft season, but you guys all agree with him.
But I will tell you that I would rather take position players ahead of Caleb Williams and then take Bryce Young at the end. You're not going to see me pay a nickel for Caleb Williams.
So that's fair, but is the 8th round a nickel or is that a penny at this point? I feel like Caleb Williams is cheap. And do you not agree with that at the 8th, 9th, turn?
You can ask Derek what my tagline was during the 2023 season, right? Again, self-admitted Packers fan, but my tagline was never Fields. You could not make me draft Justin Fields. And then I got into
And if you're looking for Achilles heel when you're going against Matt, that's his Achilles heel right there.
Okay.
I will take certain Bears players. I don't love to do it, but let me tell you this. The top 4 quarterbacks in the history of the Green Bay Packers, their Mount Rushmore is Bart Starr, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and Jay Cutler. That's how bad Chicago Bear quarterbacks have been. He was so good for Green Bay every time we played. Caleb Williams was overhyped. He played in a weak Pac-12, right? And I'm a Pac-12 guy. He does not, and if you look at kind of his off-season vibe, he doesn't seem to be super football guy. Some of these guys are in training camp. They're lifting weights. They're out throwing. They're doing all this stuff. I just don't see it. And Chicago has just not proven over the years to be able to be adept at drafting quarterback talent and then making them an NFL quarterback. So Jay Cutler was kind of a weird head casey guy. The dude could chuck the rock. Derek, where did Jay Cutler go to college?
Vanderbilt.
Yes, he did, as did Derek. So I would take Cutler all day over Caleb Williams. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm willing to be wrong. I'm really willing to go down with that ship. But Caleb Williams is going to have to prove it to me. And by the way, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, and way down my list, Adunze. If he fails, it's his fault.
Okay, I was going to say, this is a very pro Keenan Allen show, so I need to warn you to tread lightly, but now I see what you're saying, so it's okay.
Yes. Well, and they got a couple good running backs there too. So he's got a lot of weapons at his disposal. It's going to just depend on how quickly he comes around.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's get into the breakdowns. And Derek, I chose you to go first. Matt, I'm going to have you go last because you had a different build than what you're used to. I think there's going to be some interesting things to talk about. So, Derek, I do not need you to talk about every player you drafted. Just if you had a strategy going into this and any players that you didn't get a chance to talk about while you were taking them that you find interesting or picks that you weren't sure were going to fall to you, sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah. So it all starts before the draft for me. I like to be in the middle. I really don't like to be at the ends because I like the frequency of picks. Now, being on the podcast and picked, that kind of hit me, that one pick, but I'm okay with it. I was okay with Stephon Diggs as my wide receiver 3.
Yeah, but there are worse things to happen.
There definitely are. So we talked a little bit about, I tend to wait on quarterbacks in a format like this, and I generally will wait on tight ends as well. And so I did that. You'll see that here. And I'm fine with Burrow in the 6th round. And then Schultz in the 9th. I think there's value there. So I'm totally fine with that. I like to have, coming out of the 5th round, I like to have 3, if not 4 wide receivers.
Okay. And
so I had 3, and I got 3 2 number ones for sure, maybe 3 number ones, depending on how Diggs acclimates there in Houston. So I'm good with that build. And then on the running back side, I love, and many people do, I love receiving running backs. Yeah. And so, Rachaad White in particular is a favorite of mine. And I may have reached for him a little bit, but like Matt said, get your guys. He was one of the guys I would really want in this format, and being right there in round 4, maybe a little bit of a reach, but I'll take it with the upside in his receptions in the PPR. So generally, I like this build. I picked a couple wide receivers. We talked about best ball type wide receivers and Cortland Sutton and even Judy. And, those are guys that, we talked about, you don't love to have to put them in your lineup, but in a best ball format in the first 10 weeks, I mean, Sutton, he could be scoring 6 out of the 10 weeks, and I'll take that. I'll just take that productivity that we tend to see from him. He's not flashy. He doesn't really get the ceiling scores, but he's usually there every week. So I'm happy with a guy like him, and he's my wide receiver 5. So I'm good with that. And then really from there, it was just depth, lower on. Dobbins, don't love that pick, but he gets the ball. He'll get the ball. He'll probably play more than we think, and he gets into the end zone. So I'll take that upside, if it's there. And same with Roshan Johnson. I think he's the better running back there. We thought we would see that last year, and he didn't really, come out and be that. So maybe this year is the year. And so I'll take a shot at someone like that.
I assume you mean better than Herbert, because you paid an awful lot for DeAndre Swift to say that Roshan Johnson's better.
Yeah, well, right. And compared to Herbert, right. And, and I have Smith there. So it is a little bit of a handcuff.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I think it worked out well
there. So, yeah. And I think there's enough role for Swift and one of the other two running backs, there. I don't think Swift is going to be, a ball hog. So, yeah, I think there's opportunity there. And again, hopefully they work that out in the first 10 weeks and I have a clear.
And then you know what to do in the playoffs.
Exactly. So, yeah. So I'm pretty stoked with this draft. I could play with this roster.
I love it. Austin, you know the deal by now. I do want to point out just a couple of quick things before you get into it. You and Gold Raz were playing a game of zero running back chicken. He was able to go around after you, but then started to fill up his room a little bit before you. So I do want to draw people's attention to the 3 spot and the 7 spot. Similar draft strategy, but multiple picks away from each other. You guys actually took your tight end in the same round as well, Austin.
Yeah, so I was intentionally doing that. I wanted to try and fill up, since you have 3 receiver spots in this format, I wanted to make sure to fill those up early, and you have 2 flex positions, and I really want to prioritize being able to have a wide receiver in those positions because they have a higher ceiling in general than running backs do, particularly once you get into the second and third tier of running backs. What I really want to talk about with my draft is the quarterback and the running back situation, how those both turned out. So I was waiting a long time on quarterback with the strategy of trying to get Tua Tagovailoa to stack him with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Well, Tua went 2 spots before I wanted to take him. Yeah. But I was curious to see if he would come back to me around the turn after I took JSN. He did not. So I ended up going with Jared Goff, which I don't have any Detroit pass catchers. I guess David Montgomery, he does catch some passes, but not a ton. So I didn't really get to stack him with anyone, but he is going to be correlated with some of those San Francisco guys if I'm able to make it deep into the tournament. And then from there, people started taking their second and third quarterbacks way sooner than I anticipated. So I ended up with JJ McCarthy, which I feel okay about because he's probably going to start later on in the draft, or he's going to start later on in the season. So he can help give me some upside down the road. The running back situation did not quite work out the way I wanted it to. I feel good about the running backs I have, but I do wish I had a second running back that I felt was going to get consistent snaps out of the gate. Gus Edwards maybe fills that role. If he can get like 15 rush attempts per game, I'll feel pretty good about that. And then Trey Benson and Marshawn Lloyd, they were mostly betting on upside later in the season because we all know James Conner does not play full seasons of football. It's just not in his DNA, and so that'll give some opportunity to Trey Benson. And then similarly with Marshawn Lloyd, Josh Jacobs, he does play full seasons of football, but he's been playing a lot of full seasons of football, and so there's some possibility that that wear and tear starts to catch up, and Marshawn Lloyd gets some more opportunities.
I do want to throw Goldman up on the screen. He said he took Ingram because you took Kittle, and he sees the cliff being right about there. So I love that you guys went in with a similar strategy and you're influencing each other's drafts, just not something you see all the time there. And then Matt, let's talk about it. So this was not a normal Matt draft. Very different for you now seeing the end thing. How do you feel about it? I always remind folks, you don't need to talk about every player. Talk about your strategy. Talk about how things felt to you. So. Oh, Matt, I think you got muted, maybe. Did your mic disconnect? I can't unmute you, so I'm not quite sure what happened.
My bad.
There we go.
My dog, one of the dogs was barking in the background.
Oh, don't apologize at all. We're 75 minutes in. Things like this happen every now and then. So.
The Evan Ingram pick was a stinger for me because that I saw the same cliff that Goldman saw.
Yeah, you were talking about that.
I'm happy rostering Aaron Jones, but Ingram was absolutely my pick there. So I owe Austin a punch to the shoulder because he apparently in drafting Kittle caused Goldman to draft Ingram. So yeah, that one stung a little bit, threw me for a little bit of a loop. But of course, there were plenty of good players still available. It's not a build for me. I'm very similar to Derek, and what Derek said is I would love to come out of the first 5 rounds with 4 receivers. Didn't work out, but I mean, if my running back 4 is Alvin Kamara, I'm good. I figure I have enough.
There are worse things to happen in a full PPR.
Yeah, and if my wide receiver 3 is Hollywood Brown, with the fact that I think Rashee Rice has a little bit of off-season issues he's going to have to be dealing with, so it might be in his head a little bit. And Andy Reid signed this Hollywood Brown to be the Hollywood Brown we remember from Baltimore in his early start with the Cardinals. So I look for him to get back to that spot, and maybe Rashee Rice takes some coverage away from Hollywood Brown. So here's the way I look at it. Rashee Rice is a get open guy. He can catch passes. Xavier Worthy is a go deep guy, take the top off. Hollywood Brown can do both of those things.
Yeah.
So Andy Reid is a genius. He's going to line him up wherever he wants to line him up, and he's going to call plays for him. I think he has a really big season. If you look at the bottom of my draft board, Cousins, I took him earlier because I took Love late. Okay. I wanted a volume passing dude. I can couple him with Darnell Mooney, who is a shot in the dark, right? Give me a couple of Darnell Mooneys from Chicago. He could be a starter in the best bye weeks. If he turns out to be a very close wide receiver 2 to Drake London's wide receiver 1, maybe he plays for me in the playoffs. The 3 rookie receivers 2-3 years ago, I wouldn't have touched them. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Garrett Wilson have proven that the learning curve for stud collegiate receivers coming into the NFL is not what it used to be. Yeah. So I'm taking a swing with Mitchell, Leggett, and Franklin, that they can understand the playbook, they can understand defenses, and they can do what they need to do. Indy is not going to be leading from the front, so they're going to need to throw. Carolina is going to be losing all season. They're going to have to throw. Denver is going to allow Bo Nix and Troy Franklin to coexist and play together. I don't think what's the guy's name? The coach there now. He's so bad. I just think give me his name again.
Sean Payton.
Yes, Sean Payton, right? He thinks he's better than he is. So I think he's going to want to prove that Bo Nix is the guy. And with Bo Nix comes Troy Franklin, because they played together at college. They have a relationship. They know what the other guy's going to do. That does not mean that Cortland Sutton won't eat as well, but I like the fact that those two have a relationship. My quarterback 3 probably would have been Daniel Jones, or it would have been Bo Nix near the end.
Okay.
Because I'm happy with Love and Cousins to be playing every game.
Oh, absolutely.
And Cousins is going to have a bye in the playoffs. Jordan Love does not have a bye until week 9. So I'm good, and I think I'm insulated at quarterback. My tight end is weak in Dallas Goedert. My next pick would have been Jatavion Sanders, and hope that, again, Carolina has to throw a lot.
If you
I'm happy with it. It's weird. It doesn't feel right. It won't look right. But like Austin said, this is why we mock. This is why we try things. And this is why we just let the board tell us what to do. There's still plenty of players I had in my queue that I'm excited about. But through 15 rounds, like Derek said, I can play with this lineup.
If you knew you were going to get Kirk Cousins, would you have used a first-round pick on Michael Penix? Like, I feel like that's what teams do, right, Austin, the Atlanta Falcons?
Why are you
handcuff? Yeah, that would have been a really good play for me.
Instead of an oops of the draft, and I'll get us all back on the screen here in a second, I just like to have the draft board up. I'm going to do a little different than what I normally do. I don't know if I'm hanging around with Faith too much or if Faith is hanging around with me too much, but the amount of best ball teams of mine that have Kenneth Walker, Dak Prescott, Ramondre Stevenson, Brock Bowers, Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott, Romeo Doubs, Antonio Gibson, and Jalen Wright is insane. Faith drafted how I would draft. So instead of an oops of the draft, I'm just going to pat Faith on the back, which she well deserves here. I love the team she built. So kudos to Faith, just basically drafting a Ryan team, which is what I'm always looking for when I'm judging other people, is how much do they remind me of myself. So, guys, that is the show. Let me go ahead and get us all back up on the screen here. And that is not the right one. That is not the right one. I'm clearly having a tough time here. So we're going to get the draft off of the screen and we're going to get us on the screen. Hey, that's the right one. Guys, the show went incredibly long. I thank both of you. One of you guys speak again for RazzBowl, and I will get the link back into the chat right now.
And I have no idea why I'm not showing up anymore. It's better. I have a face for radio. But
yeah, you're frozen on my screen, so I can hear you just fine though. So he's gone. Derek, pressure's on you, my friend. Talk to everybody about RazzBowl a little bit.
Yeah, so RazzBowl 6, it's a best ball. It's free. That's the best thing. So go join us. We've got a growing list of industry folks every day joining us, and that's, I'll tell you, when I started, getting out of the home leagues and getting in more into the wider fantasy football world, that really drew me in, was the opportunity to play with the industry folks.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And RazzBowl gives everyone now that opportunity to do that. So take advantage. Again, it's free. There's no risk there. Have fun with it. You're going to meet a lot of great people along the way. Today Matt and I get to meet, Ryan in Austin and have fun with that. So this is the perfect example of what's so great about the fantasy football community is it's just so many great people out there, so accommodating, and just have a lot of fun with it. And that's what we're hoping RazzBowl turns out to be, is an opportunity for folks to, get in, have fun. Again, no risk because it's free. And, who knows, maybe you'll be the RazzBowl 6 champ, doing a mock draft next year with some of the other folks. So let's just get in, have fun, and look forward to drafting at the end of July.
And Matt reached out to us via Joey Wright, good friend of mine. I work with him over at Football Guys. Speaks very highly of RazzBowl, everything you guys are doing over there. But also, Matt, we appreciate the huge invite to the folks over with our Women of Fantasy Football group. So you guys are not only going to be playing all the guys in the industry, we're going to have some of the best females in the industry in RazzBowl this year. I know Wendy Early, Julia Papworth, and Faith Enos have all jumped in. So I'm sure there's plenty more that I'm not aware of whatsoever. I know you guys, when I last heard, you guys were your numbers were creeping up. Matt, do you know what you're at right now when it comes to
I didn't check this morning. As Derek knows from listening to the Howard Bender show, I may have been dipping into Grandpa's cough medicine last night, so I didn't get up super early to count. But as of Friday morning, we had 170 signed up with just about a month and a day to go before the slow draft. So RazzBowl, you've got time to sign up. We're not going to lock it until about the 28th or 29th of July. And that gives NFC time to set up all the divisions and things like that. So
there you go.
One other thing I will tell you, you guys are the first. Well, Howard was the first to hear it, but you get it. Howard's Howard.
Yeah.
You guys are the second to know that we have locked in the RazzBowl 6 logo, T-shirt, and tagline. Once we get the mock-up done where we can advertise it, be on the lookout for that. We will run. Those will be coming through RotoWare.
Okay.
And they'll be available on the site, probably at a discounted rate for the first X amount of days. We'd love to see you about town wearing that like you would a tuxedo at a 5-star restaurant. But I will tell you, Derek's seen it. I've seen it. Yeah. The logo is absolutely perfect. If you like Scott Fishbowl's logos, this one is going to be, it'll rank up there with it. It's not movie related, and that's all I'll tell you, but it's legit. I love it, and I will be buying it the day they come out. So
I love it. Austin, tell everybody what you're working on. Obviously, big announcement from last night.
Yeah, the big thing is you need to check out Summer School. It's Club Fantasy's Best Ball podcast. It's our Best Ball strategy podcast. So we have another Best Ball podcast where it's focused on actually drafting. That's exclusively on YouTube. So if you're on Twitter right now, you need to switch over to YouTube, follow, subscribe to the page so that you can see every time our episodes drop. You can follow me at Austin_FFL on Twitter and Instagram. Get all my content with Club Fantasy and my Carolina Panthers coverage at Last Word on Sports.
It has gotten to the point, folks, where I don't even know if the number is 8 or 9 now, but Club Fantasy has 8 or 9 shows every single week. We cover everything: redraft, dynasty, best ball, and as I've pointed out every week, mock drafts to help you get better at all of those drafts. We even have a DFS golf show. There is no reason for you not to hit that damn subscribe button. It is free. I love threatening you guys. Hit the subscribe button. Help us get to 2,000. We just recently crossed 1,000. We love and appreciate every single one of you guys. I'm not going to name every show we have. There are too many at this point. Check out Austin's new show. We also have our Trade Blocked Dynasty Trade Show every week with Joel Worth, Hoove, and Dusty from Drinking and Talking Fantasy. And we also have the newest mock draft show with Wendy Early, Mock Girl Summer. Her and Julia Papworth are doing that. And they just had another amazing guest on this past week, Kendall Valenzuela from Fantasy Life. So,
Nice.
guys, there's a ton of shows here. Too many for me to mention. Always remember, defense wins championships. Offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. We will see you guys at the next mock draft. Have a great day.